Everybody, welcome to Candidate Corner. This is Greater Seattle Korean Association's interviews with candidates and current electeds. And we do this because we just were awarded the King County Voter Education Fund grant. And we kind of have this studio here because, we've been using it to give like seminars and workshops for the community. And so we just thought, hey, now that we have the grant, let's interview our candidates and electeds. And really the whole purpose is to just become more of an informed voter, get to know your candidates before whatever reason you just party line, you just go down the line. And, maybe if we could spend a little bit of time getting to know our candidates, we think that's very, very important. So having said that, we're very, very pleased and excited to have Adonis Duckworth with us. Hello, Adonis. Hey, welcome. Yeah. So Adonis is currently running for Seattle City Council, position 2. And so before we let Adonis just share his thoughts and vision for our community, just really quickly, again, it's not an endorsement, but from Korean Association, but rather, again, get to know our candidates. So our whole goal is empowerment and education, so you can be a more informed voter. So Adonis, first question is just perhaps you could just walk us through some of your personal background. I know you grew up in South Seattle, in the Rainier area where you're running, and so maybe just take us back a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I grew up on Beacon Hill, right off of 19th and Hanford, about a block off of Beacon Avenue. I met my wife at Mercer Middle School, which is right there on Beacon Hill. And her mom ran a midwifery school out of El Centro de la Raza, and her dad was a carpenter. And so my mom was an executive assistant first at the VA, and then as executive assistant at the city of Seattle. And we lived in a little triplex right there on 19th and Hanford. So I'm from the South End, and I currently live in Rainier Beach now with my wife, the one I met at Mercer. She was a public defender for a really long time, and now she's still a defense attorney. And I've been working for the city of Seattle going back to 2010, started as an intern with Seattle Public Utilities. And so we live in Rainier Beach with my wife. We live in Rainier Beach with our 2 kids. I have a 15-year-old and 11-year-old, and they're great. They love snowboarding and skateboarding and dance. And really, I'm running because I want to make things better for our children and families in South Seattle.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adonis. So we got a few questions here kind of related to the community and the area itself is very diverse, which is a good thing. And, but I think, part of the reason why we do this is just kind of greater representation, not just for AA and HPI, but communities of color and all diverse cultures and backgrounds. And so second question is from, we sampled some people from our community. So they wanted to know, and if you don't mind, I'll just read it out. Okay.
Sure.
So again, Adonis, this is your first time running for elected office?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is the motivation for running. What inspired you to kind of run for Seattle City Council in the first place? And based on your background, what kind of unique perspective or leadership qualities that you feel you bring to the table?
Yeah, that's a great question. A big reason that I'm running to represent the district, quite literally that raised me, is my oldest daughter, who's 15, she came to me and she said she wanted to move. She wanted to move because she's scared and she was worried about getting shot in South Seattle.
That's crazy. So how old was she?
She's 15.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. She was 15 when she came to me and told me that. As we know, South Seattle, which is, you can think of from Chinatown International District all the way down to Rainier Beach, I-5 to Lake Washington, that's District 2. We only make up 13% of the Seattle population, but we account for over a third of the gun violence.
Oh, wow.
Throughout the whole entire city.
Okay.
So, her feers were not, they didn't come from anywhere.
For sure.
And so
even a valid question.
Even just a couple of, even just last night, we had another instance of shots fired about a block from our house at the market there at Rainier and Seward. So, I wanted to step up rather than move and leave and go somewhere else. I wanted to step up and do something for my community and see if I can do something about ending the gun violence in South Seattle, giving our young Black and brown youth other opportunities besides turning to the streets and giving them economic and educational opportunities. And I also working for the city at the Department of Transportation, where I've done outreach, engagement, and policy. Over the last 15 years, I just have not seen a sense of urgency on transportation on our roads, on Rainier and MLK.
Okay.
And I wanted to really step into this role to bring safety to those streets and bring a sense of urgency. And then
Oh, you're talking about road improvements?
road improvements,
Okay.
safety
Yeah.
improvements,
Okay.
making it easier for people to be safe no matter what type of transportation that they choose, but obviously encouraging more people to, take other modes of transportation, including riding bikes and taking the bus. And so really want to make roads safer. So I'm going to give you a little statistic on that.
Yeah.
Since 2019, our fatal and serious traffic collisions have gone up over 50%. And it's still
Is it
climbing.
because of more people there, or?
The causes are there's a number of causes.
Okay.
Anything from a person who's drunk driving, reckless driving, speeding, but speeding is usually at the heart of a lot of this. And so, for me, I want to make our roads safer, and you can do that a number of ways, and that's through education, that's through engineering, that's through enforcement. And I think it's going to take a combination of all those different things to make our roads safer. And then being out knocking on doors, affordability is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Not just in the Seattle area, but all throughout the entire West Coast, right? From here to Portland to Los Angeles. And affordability plays into a lot of different things because we've seen our homeless population almost double in the last few years. It was 8,000 at one point, and now we're up to over 16,000 people homeless. And as we see, there's a lot of people struggling in the CID. And the CID has always been a very important place for me as a kid growing up. I used to get on the bus, we'd go down there and hang out and get some food. And what we're seeing now in the CID is a lot of just a lack of attention.
12th and Jackson.
Of what's happening, and it seems to be an intractable, intractable kind of issue that just really is persistent. It's too persistent. And so for me, I want to get into a position at the city, because right now I'm more or less at the staff level, and to really use my experience, use my background, growing up in the South, and my professional background, the work I've done working on outreach, engagement, and policy, and really move into a position to where I can actually affect change, and that's going to be on city council.
Great. Thank you, Adonis. And I really appreciate what you said. Had my daughter approached me with that same question, I think the tendency for a lot of people is to say, well, let's move out.
That's exactly.
Yeah. And so I really appreciate how you're staying behind because you want to affect change. Well, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and that's where I grew up. The South End is where I grew up.
Yeah.
And we don't run.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Yeah. All right. So just to dovetail on that, Rainier and South Seattle issues, just to speak to that, Rainier Valley and South Seattle communities have voiced concern over public safety. You touched upon that already. Affordable housing, you touched upon that. Equitable development. What are your kind of top priorities for addressing these challenges? And how would you kind of go about that? Yeah.
So, when it comes to public safety, it is it's a complex issue, because what we see on the street, let's just take 12th and Jackson, for example, and the open air drug market, the open air drug use, and what is a result of the result of what's happening is you have a lot of people who are breaking into stores, they're causing disruptions. We've seen the fences with the barbed wire go up. We've seen a lot of stores and restaurants close. It is just it's really heartbreaking to see that happening. And so for the public safety piece, I think we have to come at it two different ways. And one way, for the folks who are struggling with addiction, for the folks who are struggling with mental health, we need to make sure that they get quality services, quality treatment, and they need to get the medication that they need so that from their last hit of fentanyl, which is really the root cause of a lot of what we're seeing, from that last hit of fentanyl to treatment, they don't make it, because what happens is they get sick. And there's a medication that they can take that can keep them from getting sick for just long enough to get them the treatment. So we need to do good outreach, make sure that they get that medication. And then also we need to make sure that when they do get to treatment, it's quality. Now on the flip side of that, we absolutely need to put the resources in place to break up the organized crime that is happening in the CID. We hear it from the business owners, we hear it from the neighbors. So we have to break up that organized crime. fentanyl is $5 a pill.
Yeah.
That means there is just a flood of it.
Yeah.
And that is not a one-off drug dealer coming from here or there.
Mm-hmm.
It is completely organized, and we need to use all of our different resources to break that up.
Okay.
On the public safety front.
Mm-hmm.
Affordable housing, particularly in the CID and throughout all of District 2, there's a few different components that we need. We need the land, so that's the zoning.
Okay.
We need the finances to support our affordable housing developers, and we also need to make sure that our permitting process, we kind of remove that uncertainty and that risk and that additional cost that really doesn't make projects pencil out. And so for the land, in 2026 on City Council, we'll be zoning. And we need to zone for abundant housing in a lot of different places in density. And we need to make sure that we're using our resources effectively. And if we don't have the resources, I'm talking about dollars, revenue, to help support our affordable housing builders, our affordable housing operators, and so that they have the operations and the maintenance and they can build. And then we also need to streamline our permitting process so that it's easier for folks to build.
Someone on Seattle City Council already mentioned about the permitting process, so it sounds pretty prevalent. So Adonis, to speak to, I want to go back a little bit, to speak to gun violence and also the fentanyl crisis. So,
yes.
Do I understand you correctly when you say that? Firstly, for the drug crisis, we need to get to the root, which are the dealers. Cut that supply off, right? And secondly, get the immediate treatment to get them clean. Yeah. But what do you think really stands at the root of the path to true recovery? Let's say for the drug users as well as gun violence. There's a lot of different theories, but we're curious to hear maybe your theory. Does it start somewhere at the root somewhere?
Well, if we're talking, so that's a really great.
We could probably talk all day on this.
This is a really great question.
Yeah.
I knocked on a door.
Want to see real result, right? Like actionable items. Yeah.
I knocked on a door several days ago, and the gentleman, this gentleman that I talked to was very much like, we need to, and I've heard this in a lot of different places. I don't subscribe to this line of thinking, but I'm going to get to your question. Yeah. And he said, we need to just lock everybody up and either give them the option of treatment or jail.
Okay.
And I said, well, what's the goal here? What are you trying to achieve? Is it that you just don't want to see people doing drugs, or do you genuinely want them to get help?
Right.
There's two different things, right? And he was like, well, it's hard to see, and people they need to get help. I said, well, if they need to get help, it's a deeply alcoholism addiction.
Yeah.
And I can speak from my heart on this. My father suffered from substance abuse disorder, and he couldn't live after he got out of the military, and he couldn't live with us anymore. And he ended up being one of those folks on the street.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
And he never got the help that he needed, and he died in 2012. He died from his alcoholism. So I can definitely speak from the heart on this topic. And from what I know and what I understand, treatment is going to help the body get well. It's going to, you need to be separated from the drugs and the atmosphere, and treatment, inpatient treatment. Those things can help you with that.
Okay.
But for sustained sobriety, the person has to want to do it for themselves. They're going to have to want to do it for themselves. And sometimes there are some folks who kind of speak to the point of what you would call hitting rock bottom. And when folks get to that place, to really hold on to a program, there's a number of programs out there on top of treatment that help people stay sober. I think there's Refuge Recovery, there's Narcotics Anonymous, various things like that. But when you subscribe to those types of programs, it's really, really important that a person hit that bottom. And I know that's outside the realm of policy. Yeah. But if you really want people to sustain that long-term sobriety, we really have to, first get them well, get them into a program that they can sustain that, that sobriety.
Okay.
But they have to want to.
Right. So it's when they hit that rock bottom that they realize, and then they have to want to have the desire to get better.
Yes.
And so that they come to a place where that realization occurs.
Exactly.
And then we can start the path to recovery. Okay.
Yes.
That's it right there.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. I had this final question, kind of related to Chinatown and the ID, as it relates to, they're kind of in the center of the action right now,
Yeah.
right? With what you were just talking about. But I thought it would change it up a little bit because not really a surprise question, but just, it's from the heart. It's from the heart. So
appreciate that.
we're coming up on a very important time, November 4th elections.
Yep.
And let's speak to elections a little bit and voting.
Mm-hmm.
And as it relates to AA, NHPI, and our communities of color.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have friends from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, doesn't matter. I was born in the US, but when my Asian friends when I said, well, did you vote? And they said, no. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, my vote doesn't matter. I hear that so many times, like 90% of the time. So what I want to say to that is, well, actually, have you seen some of these races? It's like razor thin.
Yeah.
So your vote does matter. And it's also something that's very, people died for this, countries, for this right to do this. And that's what makes us American. And so I try to explain it that way. Now, as it relates to our AA, NHPI, Black, Brown communities of color, I think it's great to see our voices being heard.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give some encouragement to the folks out there as to why it's important to vote, like I was just saying, and how can they become more involved? Walk us through that.
I appreciate that. It is incredibly important to vote. Your voice matters because policy gets made, and you can be a part of that policy, you can be a part of that change, or the change is going to happen to you. And so by making your voice heard, by voting, you can ensure that you are doing everything you can to get the person or that policy passed so that it will have a positive impact on you and your family. And I'm going to give you this is my own eye test observation.
Okay.
So there's an app we use to go out and door knock.
Okay.
And the app, what it tells us is all of the likely voters based on their previous voting history.
Mm-hmm.
I'm door knocking in District 2. District 2 is 70% people of color.
Okay.
So 30% white, 70% people of color.
Okay.
But this app takes me to all the different houses. I knock on the door and the person comes to the door. And I'm going to say almost 90 plus % of the people that I'm knocking on doors are white.
Oh, man.
So I want to put that in perspective. The district is 70% people of color, but the most likely voters are white, which basically means 30% of the district is more or less deciding, creating a path for the other 70. So that's why it's incredibly important to vote.
But having said that, that also may be culturally skewed in that manner because of the fact that there are not communities of color that are making decisions on our behalf. Perhaps. Okay, I see. So that's what you mean. Yeah.
So you have about 30% of the people, and maybe not all 30% of them vote, but the majority, almost 90% of the homes that I knock on the doors are white.
Interesting.
I've come home several times and said, I know there's black people that live in this neighborhood. I know there's Asian people that live here. Why are all the houses? These are the likely voters. They're the ones voting. And by them voting, they're putting the people in the positions of power. They're voting in the people in the positions of power who are going to draft the policy and pass the legislation for the whole district. So then you have to ask yourself, who is representing the district? And that's why it's incredibly important to vote.
Right there. I mean, what can you say to that? What can you say to that? So there's a lot more that can be done.
Oh yeah.
So last thing. Some young person, let's say somebody that's maybe younger than us, Gen Z or whatever, like my son, for example, he's starting to generate an interest for getting involved in the community and maybe for our next generation. Can you give some words of encouragement for them and why it's important? Like, I know we got to make money, we got to do our business, we got to study and all that. That's good. But give some encouragement as to why they need to get involved in their community.
Well, and one thing I've learned, when I was growing up as a kid, I was a little detached from, any government or voting or
Okay.
anything like that as a kid. I knew it was important. I think I registered when I was 18 and started voting, but I was detached from making the connection between my voting, the decisions that were being made, and how they impacted me. And so, as a kid, I mostly took the bus. As a kid, I rode a skateboard. As a kid, I went and played golf at Jefferson Park Golf Course. I thought those things existed in a vacuum. I didn't realize how much government, particularly local government, influences all of those things that I enjoyed as a kid, as a young person. Right. And so, the bus was 25 cents. Well, somebody's got to make that decision. The bus is going to be 25 cents. I had, my fees were discounted at the golf course, which is run by the city. And so that was like, okay, that's a decision the city makes. And so you have to really start to think about all the different things you do that a lot of young people take for granted. But the government is very involved in those decisions that you don't see from behind the scenes.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to get in,
it's those little things we take for granted.
it's the little things that we take for granted.
Right.
But a decision was made somewhere to make X, Y, and Z happen or not happen. And so if there's things that you're seeing in your community that you enjoy, like park space, maybe a new restaurant, bike routes,
yeah.
or
skate parks,
yeah. or maybe there's like a whole new set of restaurants that are opening or closing. You have to ask yourself, why is that happening? And then you can always invariably point back to local government. And so it's important to get involved. And you can get involved, with your vote. You can get involved with an advocacy group, or you can run for office yourself. A lot of young folks run for office.
Right. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Adonis. Yeah.
Thanks, so
wise words and speaking from the heart.
Yeah.
He's a true local, grew up in Rainier. So this is Adonis Duckworth, and he's running for Seattle City Council. He would appreciate your vote. It's for seat 2. And so, Adonis, do you have like a website that maybe you can put? Yeah. So
you can visit my website at adonisforseattle.com. Please tell all your friends, and we're still taking democracy vouchers and donations. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, everybody. Adonis Duckworth. So let's give a shout out to our Rainier peeps out there.
All right, what up?
All right. Hey, Diggle Planets, love you.
Yes. All right, cool.
Take care.
Thank you.